Happy to have you all here. Hopefully we won't have another problem like this, but if we do, we have the recording, hopefully, and we'll record again if we don't get a good recording. So thanks for joining. Last week I sent out an email to a lot of our InfoPath Dev community people. So we've got, let's just see, I got one comment here. Just want to make sure you can hear me. Okay, thanks, Richard. Yeah, so we sent out this this email on Friday, and we got this huge response, more than we anticipated, from the people who had been on InfoPath Dev community in the last year, and posted something, right? So we get about 30,000 unique visitors a month on InfoPathDev.com, people who have questions about InfoPath, and we put this email out to people on Friday saying, hey, would you like some free assistance assessing your current, InfoPath investment and where you're going? We can give you some advice because we've been doing it now with PowerApps for several years, and we have a tool, an app that will also help with migration called FormsViewer, which some of you are using, and we have other options out there like Nintex and K2 and BP Logics. And so we sent this email out on Friday, and we got this incredible response, and I thought, well, we might as well make it part of the webinar as well. So we are actually providing free 1 or 2 hours of help on a company-by-company basis to help you assess where you're at with your investment. And really it comes down to a bunch of questions about how many forms you have. In fact, let's just start off with a quick question to all of you. And that is, the first question is, of course, how many forms do you have? We have seen customers all over the land. What's the right word here? All over the landscape here. So we have several customers that have 200 forms or more, and then we have customers that have just 2 or 3. So it looks like we've got, interesting, we've got about half of you, 33% of you are less than 20, and 50% are more than 100. And then there's a splattering in between. Thanks for that poll. We've got a couple more quick questions here for you. One is, what is your migration timeline, and how soon are you planning to move? And this could be a SharePoint upgrade, a SharePoint migration. It could be there's no plan, but we're just worried. So it looks like most of you, no one's ASAP right now, but we've got about 50% medium range, 38% not in a hurry, and 13% soon. That's good to see. And then there's the question about budget. So do you have a budget? Is it tight? Maybe you don't know. Maybe it's just you. So this is a question that I have been asking people, because the budget is a requirement, right? You have to ask yourself, what is the most important criteria when we make our migration? Is it time? Is it cost? Is it resource? There's lots of different considerations, and you have to think about these. It looks like most of you, 57%, don't know of one, and you need to do it yourself. So glad you guys came here. There's 25% unknown, 13% have a budget with resource. No one's actually in the first category, and we had 13% also not having something that they have access to. And then I have one last question here, which I will ask later when we get through the deck. So I've got some demos today. I'm going to go through this assessment with you and talk to you about how we're helping customers make this decision. So the first question is really to assess your investment, and I'll make these slides available as part of the package for the webinar. So the question is, how many forms do you have? How many are list forms? Do you have any database-backed forms? They will be more difficult to migrate. What version of InfoPath are you using? Most of you are probably on 2010 or 2013. And then are you using any SharePoint designers today? So if you're following along, obviously, if you have a lot of list forms, the good news about list forms is the data is in the list, so you don't have to worry about extracting the data from the XML content. If you have a lot of library forms, those are the forms that store the data as XML, then you may need to extract the data from those to repurpose it in PowerApps or in some other application. So then the next big question is, what's your current environment? Are you moving to well, are you on-prem or online today? And then on the next slide, we'll see the question is about where you're going. But first of all, you want to look at where you're at. Are you using the browser forms, filler forms? Do you have a mixture of those? What about content types? Content types are a thing out there in SharePoint that make it easier to deploy forms to multiple subsites. And maybe you're using those. If you've got admin deployed forms, the forms may have code in them. So you need to look at all of these considerations to help you with the plan, because if you have these forms and they're absolutely critical to move forward, then you will have to rewrite that code into like rules or something else. And then here's a data question about how much data you have in your form. And then there's the third-party dependencies. Are you using user profile service? Do you have our plugin Q rules to extend your form? Is that part of your form today? And there's a code question. And then you might be using one of our web service accelerators, or you might be using Active Directory to get data, or some other third-party connection. So those are some questions to think about when you're assessing your current investment. And then, of course, you need to look at your requirements. So when you're moving to the cloud or when you're moving to on-prem, it's different. So in the cloud, the support, it's 2016 plus alpha. So Office 365 isn't exactly 2016. It's actually above that. They have some features missing that you get with on-prem. Like, for example, InfoPath Form Services will work on SharePoint 2016. So you can have browser-based forms, and you can have forms with code in them. So that will continue to work on 2016 on-prem, but it won't work on 365. So you can't have forms with code. Maybe you're in a hybrid situation where you have a gateway connecting you to 365. If you want to use PowerApps, you're going to need either a gateway or to be on 365. And then obviously the timeline, that's the question I asked in the poll earlier. Budget. What about mobile? Is mobile a consideration? A lot of people now make that's a critical requirement moving forward, is that the forms have to work and be performant on your mobile smartphones, your tablets, and so on. And they have to have SMS text authentication for people that are external, and so on. So these are some questions to think about. And then you may have a preference. You may have already made a decision to go with in-text forms or something else. And then, it's a question of, well, actually, you have these options. You don't have to actually, even if you've gone with something like Nintex or K2, you don't necessarily need to rule out the other two. In other words, these are all tools for you to use in your toolbox to help you migrate your forms to the future and keep them relevant as the technology changes. So a lot of times people get stuck in this mindset, well, we just have to have one solution. In reality, you're going to have a lot of different tools and a lot of different solutions out there, just like your InfoPath forms. If you have 20 InfoPath forms today, they're not all the same. Some of them are list forms, some of them are library forms. Some of those forms connect to databases, maybe some of them connect to web services. Some of them are very complex, some of them aren't. So, don't feel like you have to be pigeonholed into one path, right? There are different options and you can combine them in all. So we'll take a look at PowerApps first. PowerApps is Microsoft's roadmap to the future. And I guess I should probably ask you, and I don't have a poll for this, so I'm just going to ask you to raise your hand, and I'll just do a quick count. But how many of you are actually using PowerApps today? If you want to raise your hand and let me know. It looks like we've got about 20% of you raising your hand. Actually, maybe not. Maybe people have just... Well, Matt is using the PowerApps. So Matt, you may be the only one out of the 15 people in this webinar today. And Matthew as well. So if you're using PowerApps, that's great. Let's take a quick look at PowerApps. So I have 365, and if you have 365, you can just go to https://web.powerapps.com, and you'll see this screen. So the first thing to keep in mind is you've got different environments. So when you're playing with PowerApps and you want to create your own test solutions, you want to create your own environment. So I created this Microsoft Business App Summit environment when I went to the summit last summer and did all my training on PowerApps. Now we have a bunch of PowerApp experts here, Hillary and Jennifer and Mel. I'm not an expert, but I wanted to get familiar with it. So I installed it here. And you'll see there's two different main ways you can start building an app. There's the Canvas app, which is $7 per user per month. That's P1. And there's the model-driven app, which is $40. So there's a difference between these two. Is the Canvas app is going to be the P1 plan, model app will be P2. If you want to connect to Dynamics, you need the model-driven app. Okay, so you'll want to start with one of these. You can ignore this other stuff over here on the left or the right. So that start from data, PowerApps training. I mean, PowerApps training, obviously, you can look at that, but you don't need to worry about the data one right now. You can get all the functionality just here, starting from Canvas app. And so you'll create a new app, and you'll start playing with it. I've got the labs from the Microsoft training, the how-to, what do you call it, the pre-conference training kit. It's 13 megabytes. I will make it available to you as part of the webinar package. So you've got this wonderful hands-on training lab that you can do on your own if you have 365. It takes a couple hours, and I'll make that part of the kit that you download if you fill out the survey at the end. It's a quick 4-question survey. So I totally recommend everyone get their feet wet in PowerApps, because PowerApps is Microsoft's solution for the future. So the big pro here is that it's the current roadmap, and it also has an incredibly well-designed designer. So the designer is really nice. It's WYSIWYG. Its mobile experience is the best out there because it supports offline caching. It's very responsive. It took them about 4 years to finally get this thing ready and viable, but as of May of this year, it's definitely something that we think is mature. It's changing rapidly. They're adding new features, and there's some, every once in a while something will break, but in general, we're really pleased to see Microsoft's support for it. In fact, we're so enamored with it these days that we became a partner of Microsoft, and we're one of the 11 charter partners that Microsoft has on their website as being Power App experts. We've actually done so many of them, and we've done training on it that our customers, and we've got some happy customers that want to do testimonials, and we gave Microsoft some free marketing there. That's why they do that. And I've got a link to the testimonial or the TechNet article with us in it in the slide deck. But so we're doing a lot of Power Apps, and it's really the future. Now here's the con though. They're not as simple as Microsoft will make it out to seem. In general, they take somewhere between 20 and we've seen apps that take over 400 hours. Now in general, most of them are going to be in that 80 to 120 hour range, and that's time that you spend building the app, or it's time that somebody else spends building it for you. So there is a significant resource investment to convert existing InfoPath solutions to Power Apps or to create new ones. So Microsoft has this new term called citizen developers. That's the new mantra, right? What that implies is that you're going to have to write code. And sure enough, in Power Apps today, it's very macro intensive for certain kinds of operations. It's kind of like Excel. You've got this wonderful little macro language extensibility that you can use. And it gets complex. So it's not like in InfoPath where, well, InfoPath had issues with rules and XPath and things like that, but it wasn't quite as complex as PowerApps is. So just keep that in mind, that you will need to spend some time learning or asking us questions. We are here to help you. Relational data, they've figured it out. The parent, child, grandchild, the relational data that you have in your site is supported now. They use collections. It's not hard to do, but it does require kind of a change of how you approach your data model. And it is a little confusing, but you get used to it in Power Apps, and it's easy. In InfoPath, it was also challenged, but you just added a repeating section or repeating table, and it took care of it. In Power Apps, you actually have to add these collections, and you have to set up the views to copy the data correctly. So it's a little bit more challenging than InfoPath, but you can definitely do it. And then, of course, if you have existing data in your XML forms, your library forms, you will have to migrate that data. We have a tool to allow you to extract data from the XML, and you can repurpose it in a list or a number of lists. We have a tool that extracts from your XML into one or many lists, and they can all be arbitrarily relational dependent, you can parent, child, grandchild. So if you need that help, let us know, because we have a tool for that. And then you will need to train users. And Microsoft is changing the UI so quickly that we've decided not to continue our training course because we had to update the training material. But I believe that the training labs I send you from the App Summit in July, those are still good in terms of the UI. I don't think they've changed the UI dramatically since then. So that's PowerApps. Now, the second option I want you to be aware of is we created this tool called FormsViewer that allows you to continue using those InfoPath investments without using InfoPath, right? So it is the fastest and lowest cost. It's actually the only solution out there today that that upgrades your forms in place. So it doesn't change the actual form template, it just uses it as is and allows you to quickly take those forms and with minimal effort move them to FormsViewer, so you don't have the client, the InfoPath Form Services requirement. So this is something that we created this. We're consultants, and we want to help our customers, easily move to the future with low cost. And the whole purpose behind this was not to have to, very quick, because we have customers that have 80, 100, 200 forms, and they can't convert everything to PowerApps, so they need a stopgap. And so we created this several years ago as that, and we've been adding features to it. So we've been adding features like overlays and PDF print and mobile CSS. And I'm going to show a quick demo here on this. I have a form that so when you install FormsViewer, it's just a SharePoint app. So you go to your site contents and you say new, and you add an app, and it'll be listed here as one of your apps. So you'll have to make sure the app is available. So if you're a central admin, you install it and make it available to a site collection. And then once you do that, it works. You can just basically add it to your site. Let's see if we can find it here. So it'll show up here as one of the apps that you can install. And then once you install it, you'll see this screen. So this is the current, we're thinking about changing the color and reducing some of the text, but this is the current landing page. And this is version 3.2. We updated it on November 21st. We tend to update FormsViewer pretty much every other month nowadays. We added some features for altering images. So if you have an image that you take from a phone, you want to reduce the size of it, we have a rule that you can use to do that so that you're not uploading 10 megabyte images. And I'm going to show that in a second. But so once you go into there, you can upload a new form. And I've got a form here on my local desktop that I've demoed in the past, and this is my expense report form. So this is I'd say a medium complex form. It's probably simple to medium. So you can see here I've got about, if you look at my data source, and the way we typically assess the complexity of a form is the number of fields. So the number of fields is kind of a, what's the word I want to use? This form has about 40 fields in it, so it doesn't have a lot. So this is on the probably more towards simple than medium. And you can see that I've got one view here. Actually, I've got two views in this form. I've got the view that you see there, and I think I've got a print view, I've got a confirmation view, and a policy view. So I've got a few views in here, but this is the main view, and you can see that the view is allowing me to add expenses for my expense report. And then it's got some workflow logic that conditionally appears based on the status. It's got a read-only section for the expense items once I'm in the approve mode. And then it's got the ability to, we have SMS text authentication here. We have the ability to approve it, reject it. And then at the very bottom, you'll see that we have an overlay section that we'll see in a second in the form. But we've got two overlays. We've got a pop-up for image scaling, and we've got a pop-up that shows the OCR of the attached receipt. So let's take a look at this form real quick as an example. So I uploaded this form into, I believe it was my demos area. Actually, I believe it's my webinars. This is a different site now. So I uploaded the form, and the way you upload it is you just click on upload, and you take your existing XSN and you just upload it. It takes a couple seconds, and there's no changes usually required. So once you upload it, it'll appear here, and you could, of course, upload again if you want. You can, as you're making changes to it, you can make changes to it and continue making changes to it in InfoPath Designer and upload it again to FormsViewer. So FormsViewer reads the existing XSN format of your form, and it doesn't require usually any changes. If you have data connections, you will need to make those updated for your new site if you're moving from one site to another. But if you're on the same site today, there's no change required. And so let's open this form up. In fact, I've got an expense report library here where I've configured this to open up in FormsViewer. So I took my existing InfoPath form and I uploaded to FormsViewer, and then I configured the library to use FormsViewer to open, and you can see it's doing that right now. It's opening it using this test instance. So it's a little bit, because it's a test instance, it's a little bit slow. Usually the production is a little bit faster, but the form is doing a bunch of things on load. So we're going to say webinar demo for my expense. You can see that the form has validation. So all of the rules and all of the conditional formatting and everything that you have in your forms today just works as is. You don't have to make any changes. And this is really the benefit of using FormsViewer as a stopgap in your toolbox, because it allows you to quickly move over your forms so that you don't have to worry about converting everything to PowerApps at once. You can use FormsViewer while you're converting your forms to PowerApps, or for those forms that you just don't care about converting to PowerApps, but you want to keep them working. This is a good alternative. So let's just buy some coffee here from my favorite coffee shop here, Heart Roasters in Portland. And I'm going to attach an image. This is going to be my my receipt. And this is a pretty small receipt. This is not something I took from my cell phone. I think the amount of the coffee was $71. Let's see if I can actually add it correctly here. And it automatically adds a row. This is a nice feature that we've added as a rule to InfoPath, is the ability to automatically add a row after you tab away from one. But in this case, I only want one row. So you can see when I hit submit, that first overlay at the bottom is going to pop up, and it's going to give me these 4 buttons. Because the image is so small, I'm just going to go with the actual size. Now you can, if I chose something smaller, it'll scale it down. And you can see that it generates a PDF, and it opens it up in a new view. Now this is one of the really cool features, the new rules that we've added. So this is just a stock InfoPath form with a special rule in it on submit that actually generates a PDF. And this PDF is actually stored in my document library. And so then back to the form, it says it was submitted successfully. I can close it, go back to my library, and open it up again. Now we've got a Microsoft Flow on this library that's going to send me an email, but there's the form I just submitted a few seconds ago. So I can just open it up from here, and you can see that it's Google has some interesting caching lately. The Chrome was updated, I think, last week, and I've been struggling with the new caching model. But here's the form that was submitted. It's got the reject and the approve. And now if we click on view, you'll see that other overlay that has the receipt in it, and it also sent the receipt to Google and did OCR for it. So there's a bunch of really cool new features. Many of you already know about this because you're using FormsViewer today. So I just wanted to point this out. This FormsViewer is a nice stopgap for existing forms that you don't have time or money to convert. And it's got some new features. The main drawbacks of FormsViewer is that the mobile is using the browser, so it's not a rich client experience. It will not be as fast as PowerApps on the client, because PowerApps is a rich client. So you can use it on mobile. We have some nice extensions for mobile CSS and JavaScript. It'll look better on your phones than InfoPath currently does, but it won't give you as snappy a responsiveness as PowerApps. And the other big drawback is that we don't have support for editing the canvas. You still have to use InfoPath Designer. Microsoft says they're going to support it until 2025. We believe them, but if something were to break in the Designer today, you'd have to manually go in and update the forms. Now, we do intend to provide Designer support for editing in the canvas later next year. We've been trying to do it, but we've been so busy with other stuff that we just haven't gotten to it yet. But we are we're committed to doing that soon. Let's talk about third party. So why isn't third party an option? Well, it is. If your organization decided to buy Nintex Forms or K2, then you're stuck with that, right? Now, and you're going to jump into Nintex Designer, and it's not going to be, Nintex Workflow is awesome, right? Nintex Workflow Designer, love it, right? Much better than Flow in some ways with debugging, but Flow is pretty cool too now. But Nintex is still really the best UI experience for designing workflows. But the Forms editor isn't so good. It's not WYSIWYG. There's a lot of difficulty. K2 is even worse. We've done both. We were certified K2 Forms. We thought that K2 might be a future solution for our customers, so we got certified several years ago. Unfortunately, they stole one of our PMs, even though they had a non-compete, and they stole a client list from us, and so they're not very nice people to work with. Nintex, we love these guys, but it's almost like Microsoft is sort of putting a target on them, because with PowerApps now and Flow, Microsoft is a lower cost solution than any of these other parties. So at some point they may go away. In fact, this year Nintex and K2 were both sold to private equity companies, and the founders and some of the major people like Mike Fitzmaurice, they left, and they're working for other companies now. So you just don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Nintex has still got some great people there, and I don't think that there's any real risk of them going away in the near future. But you just don't know, given what's going on in the market. Microsoft is leveling the playing field, and they're basically doing it by reducing the cost. So, and I don't hate to be a Debbie Downer, is that the right word? I hate to be a negatory influence here, but I really do not recommend going to a third party unless you already have it. And in which case, go ahead, use it, compare it. You can, prove me wrong if you want. We've already looked at these things, and we're really giving you this advice because our customers have complained to us about the experience. They have not complained. I mean, they complain about everything. They complain about PowerApps too. But PowerApps and Nintex Designer are quite a bit different, right, for the Forms piece. And so if you have a third party that you've bought and it's in your budget already, then you should try to use it, and we can help you. We've got some experience with various third parties. But in general, I don't recommend it because of the cost. So finally, what you need to do is create a plan. You need to create a plan, and we can help you with this. You want to propose a plan to your team. Like I said, you don't have to have a single option. You want to cover your current environment. You want to pick out your requirements. What's the most important thing? Is it budget? Is it time? And then based on that, you can make a decision more easily, right? You need to get your team's buy-in. You need to persuade them of the probability of success. One way you can do that is by showing them your forms, working in FormsViewer very quickly. Say, look, here's our stopgap, here's our insurance policy, right? And then you can have time to build your PowerApps, or maybe just use PowerApps for your new solutions, and keep like FormsViewer, for example, for your existing ones. So there is training out there. I'm going to send you that 13 megabyte packet from Microsoft so you can get trained up on PowerApps and Flow if you haven't done that already. And then, of course, we're here to help. If you've got outside resources, make sure they know what they're doing. I just had some, interaction with PowerApp 911 the other day, and they're so busy that they're hiring people like crazy, and some of the people they're hiring don't know what they're talking about. So we've been doing this for 15 years, and we're relatively under the radar. But we're here for you, and you should feel free to use us. We're going to give you some free help, 1 or 2 hours at least, to get you, to help you with the migration. So don't forget, we're here for you. I've got one more question for you, and then I'll actually ask you if you've got questions for me. So there's one last poll here, and that is, what do you think? So are you going to go with, have you made a decision on PowerApps? Are you going to use PowerApps for your new forms, your old forms? Are you using FormsViewer? I know some of you are. I can see in the list. Maybe you're using something else. So if you've, I think that the poll is out there, but maybe we're not getting a whole lot of response to it yet. Hopefully you can still hear me okay. And I don't see anyone responding to this poll, so I'm just wondering if maybe I've got the wrong setting. But at any rate, maybe I did something wrong. I want to thank you for being here today. Here are some reference links, and we've got questions. Obviously, if you've got questions for me, now's a good time to ask them. And I'll take a moment here. And Kathy, you should show it again. So the poll, let me try the poll again here. I don't know, maybe I can't do it now. I'm trying to show the poll, but it says it's closed. So maybe I screwed that up. Sorry about that. Yeah, well, the question really is you know, what are you using today? And I think we have another question in the survey that's related to this. So feel free to look at the survey. Like I said, I will, if you get questions now is a good time to ask. I am going to send you out this kit for the training of PowerApps and Flow. It goes over Canvas and model-driven PowerApps. We also have training available on our website for FormsViewer. We did FormsViewer training in September. We had a good turnout, and we have a lot of stuff online for that. If you go to InfoPath Dev, underneath downloads, you can find all of our training from the past FormsViewer. You can install the app on your servers. On-prem, we can help you with that. You can also install online on 365. We have documentation for both scenarios. The main difficulty with on-prem is that you have to set up a server to serve up those excess sends, and that can take somewhere between 4 and 20 hours of time to do it. So if you look at our download site on the right here, you can see that there's the kit, the package from the September 2018 training. We had 4 days of training, lots of hands-on labs, lots of really cool techniques using some of the stuff you saw in the expense report and more. And then we've got the FormsViewer documentation here as well that you can look at. If you've got any questions, feel free to just email us here, and we'll do a free assessment and advice for you. I know that some of you have already signed up for that offer that we presented last week. So if you're interested, please don't hesitate to email me on that. And are there any other questions? And so it looks like there's a question here. Well, I'm not sure, but someone's asking about the on-prem site. Yeah, you will need a separate virtual machine if you're running FormsViewer on-prem, and it has to have IIS on it, and it has to have access to a SQL database. But it's all covered in the documentation. It's fairly complete. It's a 40 or 50-page document. Anyway, I want to thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to helping you in any way we can. We've got a lot of people here. It's not just me, so if you need help, please don't hesitate to reach out. And good luck with your migration. Have a great day. Happy holidays.